Oh, that's me. Hey, everybody, welcome to DDOCast episode 708. And it is being recorded on May 4th of 24. May the 4th be with you. Today we have me, Nachowench. We have the lovely Miss Kaleva. And we also have, now I'm drawing a blank. I knew that was going to happen. We have Maetreim,
Hello.
Griglock, and Gariss with us.
Hello.
Greetings and salutations.
Welcome to DDOCast.
Thank you for the invite.
Today, our episode is going to be the first in a series. We're going to be doing it every once in a while, starting from basic builds and building on that to more complex builds. But right now, we want to introduce you guys to the DDO character planner. My Twitch is not updating, so I can't see what you're doing.
It should be the DDO Planner V1 up.
Nice. And Maetreim has graced us with his presence. He is actually the creator of the DDO character planner.
For my sins, yes.
Insert applause there. Of the DDO we need a soundboard character planner.
For my sins, yes.
Insert applause. And we're gonna. So tell us, how did this start? Like, what made you say, "Hey, I'm going to devote a whole lot of time to give this to people for free"? It's free, you guys. You can go download it.
Well,
Yeah.
I woke up one day and realized I was an idiot and started working on this. Actually, it came down to back in the day when we had Ron's character planner, the original character planner. It wasn't being really updated at the time because it was at the end of version 3 and they're looking to update it to version 4, which was based on a database of some sort. And I applied to join their programming team at the time. So I actually got access to their source code and talked to, after examining it, I realized they were going in a direction away from where I would like the project to go. So I said to myself, I can do this alone, which is unfortunately a very stupid task because it is a very, very big task. And so I stole a small amount of data from the Ron's character planner in the form of the list of feats and a couple of bitmaps. And I set off from that point to try and generate my own character planner based on the technology that I use in my everyday work, where I'm a software engineer for a company that produces software for scientific instrumentation. So I originally aimed to just say, I want this to be as easy to use as possible so that you can do everything at once and chop and change to go wherever you want to go. And I slowly built it up in layers in that regard. And that's how I started into it. And it's just been a matter of trying to keep it up to date with the changes in the game, which have been going on for years now. But I should also say it's not the only character planner out there. You've also got the DDO Lite tools that are also out there, but are currently being maintained by alternate developers. So depending on what kind of experience you want for character planning, that's also a suitable tool to use. So I'll plug my opposition at the same time.
I was unaware of that other character planner.
Yeah, the DDO Lite planning tools. It also has an adventure compendium and allows you to keep track of lots of other things, but it doesn't track parameters like the DDO Builder does. you basically get a text interface to say, oh, I'm taking core 1, core 2, this, and this, and you just get the titles of the things only, and there's no icons or bitmaps or things like that to work through. So it's a very cut back interface that runs in Visual Basic, if I remember correctly, and can also be used across the web, I think. But I'm not 100% sure on that because I haven't really looked at it in quite a while.
So when did you, like, time frame start on this project? Because I started playing DDO in late 2009, early 2010, and I vaguely remember seeing some stuff about the other character, the previous character planner that you had mentioned, Ron's.
Yeah, Ron's character planner.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So it's hard to. I mean, if you want to see when I first posted, you'd have to go back to the old version of the forums when I first posted about this, to make it available to the community. When it back in like one build 6, when it's that build 208 now or something like that.
Okay, so
In
you've been at
those
this for a
days,
while.
yes. So it's been going on for at least. It's been available to anybody to use for about 4 to 5 years, possibly even longer. I can't remember now. And I was probably developing it for up to six months before I actually released it to anybody outside of out of just myself, because there was so much initial data you have to get in just to get it to be slightly functional. I used to get it to work with just like it would only build a monk to start with because that's what I played. So I was working on planning my own characters in it, and that was my main at the time. And it's just been a matter of plugging away and filling in the gaps. Um, Over the years, I've been constantly adding additional features to it, because originally that like you've got the class and levels screen on the right hand side where you've got the list of all the classes and the feats side by side. That never used to exist until around about version 190 to 100.
Okay.
So that was a new screen. If you go to the other screen, which I think is the one with the green arrow up in the toolbar, um,
The green. Okay. Oh, there we go. Okay.
yeah, it would allow you to plan levels one at a time on that particular screen. So you say, I want this class, and then you could pick the feats. It might well obviously be the red one. It's one of the arrow. That's the one. So you could say you've got the highlighted button, which is the level you're looking at, and you could click on the skills individually to say up and down. But it's all very, very clunky. So I eventually decided to get rid of that. So version 2, that screen's completely gone.
Okay.
But in version 1, it's still there because some people might be using it in that manner. So I've been sort of keeping it maintained for people who've used it from a previous experience. But with that being, you have to click on the level one at a time. You couldn't really do quick planning. So you're like, oh, when's the next feat? It's search down the list. It's hard to spot. Whereas on the one where you've just got this class is here, or got a feat slot at 6, 9, 12, and I get other certain types of feats at different levels.
Yeah.
Makes it very quick and easy to put your initial thoughts of the build together. So that was the main aim of this, to try and be very quick, to allow people to access what they want. And then from that, I think people were saying, well, it's a single selection feat, so why do I have to select it at all? So if you select the base class one for like your Warlock pact, it automatically fills out all the other pact spells and things like that for you.
Oh, yeah, I did
You
notice
probably,
that.
yeah, you probably need to like scroll across a bit because I think it's just off the right hand side.
Yep. Yeah, I picked this build that I have up is one that I kind of do.
Yes, if you clicked on the Great Old One and changed it to a different pact, it would automatically change all the feats that for the Great Old One packs to the whatever pact you switch to, for you.
Yep. Yeah, I got a couple of pop-ups there that said, "Hey, we're
Yeah,
doing
it
this."
tells you what it needed to change and what it filled out for you. It tries to maintain your feats for you. So, for example, if you moved a feat that was a prerequisite of a one later on, it will try and move things around as best it can to try and effectively throw them away out of your build automatically, which is not particularly pleasant. So if you, for example, were to introduce a different class at level 2, everything would move down automatically for like empower and quicken and heighten, because those would then go into the standard slots at those levels wherever it can. So it tries to maintain your build as best it can in a valid state to stop you from making any mistakes.
Yeah, which is it's nice. And so uh, it's
So
the
that was an interesting kind of
yeah.
thing to update. Another kind of original backwards thing was the reset tree or revoking enhancements in the tree. Was that it used to just hold them in the order that you trained them, so you could only revoke them in the order that you trained them uh, backwards. Whereas now you've got these little backwards arrows on them, which you can see in the top left hand corner, certain enhancements. It basically says the way you've spent points in this tree, you can actually revoke this particular one because there's nothing dependent on it elsewhere in the tree. So you can sort of remove stuff in the middle of the tree when you need to, which is not something you can actually do in the game. And working out the rules for that was it hurt my brain for quite a few weeks.
Yeah.
I bet. How do you keep up with all the changes that are made in the game?
So, I mean, let's say if we talk about when Dragon Lord came out, um, while it was previewed on Lamania, I would go in and actually just uh, copy one of my characters from the main server and TR into a Dragon Lord, and I'd take screenshots of the character creation screen, which actually shows you what feats you initially get, and I'd try and hover over every single new feat to try and get the icon of it and the description of it. And you get that for level 1, and you could also see what were your class skills in the initial buy screen at level 1 before you actually enter the game. Once you were in the game, I would then pop up the enhancement trees, and basically I would hover over every single item and take a screenshot of it. If it was an item which has selectable items, you can actually pop up the dialog box, even though you can't select the things in it, and hover over those items individually and take screenshots of it. So I end up with um, between 50 and 100 screenshots per enhancements tree, which I would then process offline to create the actual tree from scratch.
Sounds
So,
like a tedious manual
well,
process.
yes and no,
we're
because
we're appreciative of it. Don't get me wrong,
so
but
I actually have a data structure which is it's just called a blank tree, which is it has all the enhancements, which basically just says I've got core 1 to 6, I've got tier 1, all the tier 1, tier 2s, 3, 4s, and 5s. And it's a matter of I go into it, I have to give each individual enhancement a unique name. So everything's got an internal name that might be, for example, Dragon Lord Intimidate, for example. But it might be Dragon Lord Intimidate 1 because there might be another tier higher up, which is Dragon Lord Intimidate 2. And you
okay.
get various numbers, internal names, but each enhancement internal name is different to what it actually displays in the user interface for the actual name of the enhancement. So the only thing that I actually save when you train something would be the internal name, and if it's something with a selection, the selection name that you actually took from the list of possible options.
Okay.
Yeah, and it dynamically calculates how many action points and you've spent during the process. So, for example, if I was to update the tree between you saving this version and the new version of the software coming out, and suddenly all the prices have changed, it would recalculate the cost of the action points that you spent on reload of the file. So
Okay.
it works out that, and it can also have trees can have version numbers to say this tree has changed so much. You basically just have to throw all the they've trained away and start again from scratch because there's no way you can convert from one to the other. So I've got internal methods to say invalidate the user's data when they load this file and make them start again from scratch in this tree because it's changed so much. So I've had to consider all the different edge cases during development.
Yeah. And it's like, so I'm not a software developer by trade. I'm to mechanical engineering in my day-to-day life. But I've been dabbling in some software engineering stuff, and I'm actually like an indie hobbyist game developer. So I've learned a lot of logic and coding principles and stuff like that. I'm actually working on in my day-to-day job as well, working on customizing our CAD software. Um, so with that said, I understand a lot of what you said on the internal like data structures and all that stuff because if I'm not mistaken, everything this is written in C++, correct?
It's written in C++, but it's
Okay.
sitting on top of the Microsoft Foundation classes for which handles all the Windows interactions.
Right. Okay.
But in some cases, I've had like a combo control is fairly obvious, but the enhancement trees are actually a control specially written for this application only.
Okay. Yeah, I was
So
gonna ask you if you had written any custom stuff or was able to use all standard libraries and whatnot for it.
well, it is sitting on top of the Microsoft Foundation classes, so that does all the things like handles all the floating windows for me. But I had to all the things which draw specially, like the inventory panes, the enhancement trees, the epic destinies, the class lists on the right hand side. Those are all custom controls which I've written, which basically means you have to handle all the different events that can come in from the user interface, like the user's moved the mouse to this location, they've clicked this location, and I have to like hit check all the locations to say, well, they've clicked on level 7, but they've clicked on the feat selection at level 7. Oh, they've got a selection there. I can drop down a list. And then I have to go away and say, oh, what feats can actually be selected in that position? What type of feat slot is it? And it would then filter out all from all the feats that are available to give you the list, and then you might have to highlight your current selection. It might also have to list things like items which you decide remove items that you choose to ignore, or it might have to include items that you've decided I want to show everything regardless of whether I can train it or not, because I want to find out why I can't train a feat at this level which I expect to be able to train. And it would hover over and say, oh, you're missing this requirement because you haven't got the strength of 15 to train this particular feat or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of that makes all
So there's
sense.
lots of different things like that going on in the background for handling the custom controls. Um,
Yeah, I found with trying to figure out, or work through that logic, um, it's it takes like a certain, I don't know, focus or, and like the more I've done it, the better I've become at it, if that
yes,
makes sense. So,
yes,
yeah.
true.
um,
Things get better with practice. But
right. Like, oh, that doesn't work. Um,
and
now,
I might have tried 5 or 6 different ways to get something to work before I actually get to the version that's this is how it will work, and then you get it to work in a rudimentary manner, and then you rework the whole thing to be nice and clean, and it does the job properly.
right.
But you have to spend quite a little while like messing around in a dark room until you find out, oh, there's a wall here, there's a wall there, and there's a table that's tripping me up halfway across all the time. And I
Yeah.
found the light switch, and I know what I'm doing now.
Right. The debugging process is it's a skill.
Yeah,
Um, now, so you've been at this one version one for a few years.
that's been probably going back 6.5
Yeah.
years, something like that.
I'm gonna switch my screen and change the output. But we have the version two
Yes.
that is out. Okay, it's switched now on. It's should be showing version two. I don't have any characters built in version two. This is actually my first time, or
Mhm.
technically second time. I tried it yesterday. Looking at version two. So
A
it,
lot of it appears to be the same, but it's internally I've thrown away a lot of the bad programming that I did in version 1 because I didn't really plan version 1. I basically said, "Oh, I'm going to try and get it to do this," and off I went, storming off down the road, and then you end up going around a mountain rather than through the tunnel that goes underneath it.
Right.
So what I did is I thought about for version 2 all the things I got wrong in version 1, which I haven't got the time or the effort to try and fix in version 1. An example would be how the effects list works. So on the right hand side, when you click on ability, it says, "Oh, you've got all these effects that are applying to your charisma," for example, and you've got enhancement coming from this item and this coming from that. In version 1, breakdowns work with things called active effects, but all the data is held in effects. So you'd have an item might have an effect object, which then is internally translated to an active effect object that's put into a breakdown, and then it's like I was constantly having to work out how to translate an effect to an active effect, and I basically said, well, they actually are the same thing. So the breakdowns should just work with effect objects.
Right. And so now this version 2, is that kind of like in a beta state, or
It's an early beta. It's probably an early beta now
okay.
because the things that are not working properly in version 2 are the fact that the gear, because there's so much of it, because the biggest thing in version 2 is you can now plan your character at any level rather than cap. So you've got on the left hand side where it says life 1 and build 1 level 32. If you were to click on that or double click on that with the mouse, you could then say, actually, I want to plan this character at level 1. And it would only show you details for a level 1 character. So you'd only have 4 action points to spend. You'd only have 1 class to be able to select and things like that.
Okay, that's really nice.
Okay, but you might also say, actually, I want to plan this character at level 2, 3, 4, all the way up to level 32 and see how it progresses right the way through. So if you were then to say, click on add build, it will copy the current build and put a new version in at level 4. And then you could say, I'm going to check that one to level 6. And you can change them to individual levels, and you can plan the character multiple times in multiple ways.
Okay, that's really nice. I like that.
Yeah. So you could have the character at level 1. How powerful will they be? What gear have they got in at level 1? What they've got at level 8. So you can plan it at individual steps. Because you
Okay.
might have to actually respec your character part way through, and you want to be able to plan for that.
So that's really nice. I am a big fan of that because I'm a little bit like how you did the first planner. You just figured out you wanted to go somewhere, and off in that direction you went, right?
Yep.
That having plans are good, but that doesn't quite constitute a full plan, you know.
And in a lot of
So,
cases, is you end up down a dead end, and it's like, oh well, I
right.
can't really back out of this and get what I want in there because I really wanted to go to Norway rather than get stuck in France or something like that.
Right. Yeah, I learned a lot that way, and it's fun, but it's I ride the struggle bus more than I should be. But
And the other things I also wanted to do this, apart from the fact that you've now got gear at every single level. One of the things in
yeah.
version 1 is I have to create every single item manually that appears in the builder. So somebody puts it in the wiki. I go to the page on the wiki. I extract the icon that's going to be used for the item. I take an existing item that might be, say, a set of braces. I rename it, save it as a new file, and then hack out all the previous effects and put all the descriptions and everything in there, and build the item from scratch. And it might take me 2 to 4 minutes per item, depending on how complicated it is to put together. Whereas for version 2, if you click on the development menu, I don't know if you'll actually see the options on Twitch, but in there it's got things like download the wiki. So what I've done is got tools built into the software that goes to all the item lists within on the DDO wiki, and will download every single item's page individually, and then it will parse those and create the items automatically. So I
Okay.
don't have to create them. But unfortunately, the automatic procedure is still slightly buggy. So when I first did it, and I think there's 7,200 items in there, out of those 7,200 items, I had 30,000 errors in those 7,200 items,
Right.
which I knew of. So
So
I've been
what?
clearing those down. I'm down to 1,450 now. Errors in those 7,000 items.
So when it comes to somebody using version 1 versus version 2, which
I would say for the
which do
moment,
you prefer?
I would say stick with version 1 for now, but I would say in 6 months I'm probably going to be retiring version 1 myself, and you can just use version 2 at cap as if it was version 1. So I don't know if you've got the version here. If you click on the file menu, has it got the import or V1 file option in there?
Yes, I just downloaded V2 yesterday, so.
Okay, so I've added in a version, a feature to this which allows you to load a V1 file into V2 because the file formats, although they're XML, they're not completely compatible. So it will do its best to translate from version 1 to version 2, so you don't have to do all the work again.
Okay, that's
And
really nice.
it gets around about 90% of it correct when it on an import, I think.
Okay.
It's just for things like augments and some items might not quite translate correctly because their names have changed a little bit between versions. But yeah, there was a lot of effort into making sure it was backward compatible for your previous builds.
Okay, so and then in chat I've put a link to your GitHub for DDO Builder, which I wanted to try to bring that up on screen. But when you get to the GitHub, why is it not?
Yeah, there's a releases index, but
There we go. Okay. Yeah, so I wanted to bring up the GitHub page because it's, if you're not familiar with GitHub, this is like, well, you're like, what am I looking at here?
yes. So actually, in my posts on the DDO forums, I actually link the releases subfolder. So if you click on the word releases on the right hand side, where it's got the number 205 next to it.
Releases 205. See, I'm
Yep.
only quasi familiar with it. He said right hand side.
So yeah, if you just click on the word releases on the right hand side, it's about halfway down your screen.
It's right there.
There it
If you
is.
look and you see about, yeah.
Okay.
So this is the page that I normally link in the DDO forums. So it basically just takes you to the latest release, and underneath the current release notes, if you scroll down to the bottom, there will be a link to a zip file.
Yep.
And that's what you need to click on to download. Now there's 3 sets of files there. You want the top one, which is DDO Builder version number.zip. The other 2 are source code in various formats. So if you wanted to look at the source code of the program, you can, and you could mess around and see what's going on and how badly I did the work. But if you if you get the zip file, you could then got a zip file that you can unfold into a release folder of your choice. Now, typically, it's been designed so that you can unzip it directly on top of any previous version of version 1 that you've done before. So as you upgrade, it will basically overwrite the existing, but keep your current settings. So you don't lose your current settings when you upgrade software by unzipping a new copy of the latest on top of the old one.
Okay. Yeah.
If that makes sense.
So with the updating V1, um, it was on the user's end. We had to go to the GitHub page and download the new version. Is it going to be a
Yes.
similar process for V2?
It's going to be exactly the same with V2
Okay.
for the moment. I mean, I do have access to stuff like Install Shield, but putting it all together into an Install Shield package is probably just a bit too much effort. I mean, from my point of view, I basically just say, I have an output folder, and I just basically say, zip that content out, please, and put it as a zip file on the download, and I'm good to go. So it completely matches my local development environment, apart from not having the source code in it.
Right. And then if they wanted to, from the releases, I'm sorry, from the releases page, get to V2 because V1 is kind of right there front and center.
Okay, so if you wanted to get to V2, if you click on my name in the top left-hand corner where it just says Maetreim, you scroll down to the very top left-hand corner. So that's me, my list of things, and it will say there's 2 repositories, and you could got DDO Builder, which is the one you just came from, and you got DDO Builder version 2. So if you had to click on that one, you could get to the repository of version 2
Okay,
via
so they're
GitHub.
separate repositories.
And from there, you could go to the releases. So I've had 19 releases of version 2 since it's been going, and you could get the latest version of version 2.
Okay, which I've linked this page, the release page for both in chat,
Yes,
and I'll also have that in the description for the video and all that stuff.
and I have a different forum thread for each in the DDO
Yep.
planning sections or whatever. I've forgotten the name of the particular sub forum that's in.
And now because V2 is in like the early beta stage, contacting you with bugs or issues that people find, is it best to reach out to you on the forums under the posts that
I
you
actually
make,
get them.
or
I get them from sort of 3 different routes. There's people who mail me directly in game, or actually, so I actually be running around in the game, or people, and I'll get an email or an internal game mail that says, "Oh, I spotted these problems," and I'll generally take a copy of that text and allows me to try and reproduce and fix the problem. So if it's not that, then you can post directly in the relevant forum thread, which I usually check to make sure I've cleared out all the bugs out that are listed in there as well. And there's also, you can post directly to the issues. So if you were to click on the word issues on the left-hand side where it's got issues bracket with the number 6 next to it, if you've got a GitHub account, you could actually raise a defect here, and
okay,
then I'd know about it.
right?
And you can attach files, you can insert images and things like that.
Okay.
Kaleva, you need to change your Discord thing. You changed all the pictures down at the bottom.
Oh, it did. Uh. Oops.
It's more useful for me to have a GitHub issue like this because anything that I do as a reply, you'd receive as yourself, assuming you've set up a relevant email address. So if I actually action or reply to a given issue, you get that reply in your email as well.
Okay.
Mm.
So
But actually, most of the issues here are why aren't these items working? Well, it's because I had 34,000 errors to work through, and I'm down to 1,400 at the moment.
right. So we definitely appreciate you making this, doing this. It's a very large project, and
That is very helpful
yeah,
to many, many people,
and
which
which our other guests, the DDOExperiance and the Gariss use pretty regularly. So we could bring them in and get their thoughts on builds and whatnot.
yeah, I wanted to start with the DDO experience because you just started not too long ago on DDO stream with Fixer Upper, which is the title of your slot for the DDO stream, where you have people submit builds and you help them work through it to make their builds, I don't want to say better, but better.
Do what they want.
Yeah, do what they want to do.
Yeah, so on the show, basically the goal is to help folks feel more comfortable talking about builds and building in general. I know that there's a little bit of a, I don't want to say a stigma, but there's a real reluctance, I feel, in the community for folks to be open and share builds. No one wants to get picked apart or feel like um, they're going to be told to try to play a different way than how they really enjoy engaging with the game. So the goal of that show is really just to expose as many people as possible to how endgame players think and approach building, and to really take those builds that might be niche builds and help make a few tweaks to make them really perform well in the game. And one of the things I would say is using Maetreim's builder is great. Even before I started thinking through doing the Fixer Upper show, I think the builder is just overall a time saver. I don't even know if we could calculate in hours the amount of time that you have saved players with this tool.
Well,
Not having to actually build the character, but being able to preview changes, whether it's previewing your DCs or especially on a melee where you have so many key stats that you have to go through. Having that builder tool available to showcase what the build will look like at endgame before you run it up it's just an invaluable tool overall.
I just wish it
So
was 100% accurate for that. It's usually about 90 to 95% there accurate at the end. That last 5% is going to be difficult to get.
yeah, I find the places where it's not accurate are not critically changing to any particular build, and like you said, it gets you very directionally accurate on I would say 99% of the builds I've asked it to perform. So with that said, I mean, I don't want to underestimate just the sheer amount of knowledge that you had to have to make this be that as accurate as it is, in terms of how DCs are calculated, how double strikes calculated. You know, think of any ability or any stat in the game. So
That's
I
the wiki for me. I go to the wiki, study that, work it out, and I usually implement it enough, and I've forgotten how it all works a week later.
I was
To be
gonna
honest,
say you're
I didn't do
probably
it
one
just
of the
enough.
game's leading knowledge experts now, right? Just from working out the builder tool.
Yes and no. So it's difficult to say because I might know all. I've had to program every single enhancement, for example, but it doesn't mean that I know how to use them properly. Um, like if I went out of my comfort zone with the builds that I play, I'm usually as lost as the next player, to be honest. Um, there's just so much knowledge in the games how to play particular builds.
Yeah, and there were other builders beforehand. So I know, like you had mentioned, I think it was Rob's builder,
Ron's builder, yeah,
and
the
in
character
addition to
builder
Ron's,
light, yeah.
I think there was LSD had a version as well back in the day. So there have been various tools, but I think what you've put together here is the most comprehensive builder tool. And, you know, I just think it's a great service to the community and it's free, so lucky us.
Mhm.
I recommend the tool to everybody. With that being said, I love that the you were talking about in version 1, the view that we have up right now of the class and levels.
Yes,
I actually do use the other view, and I was excited when I saw in version 2 you have a box for this. Because if you're taking, say, ranger levels, this view here, thank you, Kaleva, that they switched to will show you the
yes,
automatically granted feats by level, and I think
yes,
that's a really good feature as well.
yes, and that's now available in version 2, where you just hover over the line in the other screen, and it automatically populates the list of automatic features you get at that level. Um, in version 2, it also shows you the list of all your granted feats and things like that. And where before you say you get this feat, now I have versions where you get this feat, but you've got these requirements for you to use it. Because I don't know if you're aware, in Shadow Dancer, you've got the if you have if you don't have evasion, you gain evasion. If you have evasion, you gain improved evasion. If you've got improved evasion, you no longer fail your save on a 1 kind of enhancements. There's that particular option in Shadow Dancer, I think. And so that's like 3 versions of the same feat. In version 1, I basically just say, well, I've got to give you all of them because I can't model that. Whereas in version 2, it can say, oh, no, this feat, this granted feat has got the requirement of you've not got this, or you've not got this, or you've got this. And I can actually put in very detailed requirements for something to become active or inactive in the software.
That's amazing. And when you were previewing version 2 earlier, I got really excited because, as you mentioned, being able to iterate a build and say, hey, at level 4, you're going to level it this way. But then, hey, from level 4 onward, you're going to swap your enhancements out. Now you're going to run it this way instead. Whether it's a caster that's heavily relying on SLAs earlier on, or a melee build that doesn't build into two-weapon fighting until a little bit later in the build, I just think that's great to be able to flesh that out.
Yeah, that was a feature that was requested multiple times in version 1. I've always had to say, sorry, it's only coming in version 2. So yeah, it's finally arriving. Other features that people requested were things like, I want more than one build in the same file, which is something you can actually do with version 2. So you can have a life with builds. You can also have multiple lives. So you could, if you start a character from scratch, life 1 could be your very first life character, which was, I played a fighter, that one. You keep a log of it, create a new life. I then became a wizard at level 2, and it has one past life. And you could have every single life all in order, all in the same file as
Yeah,
to what you did.
that's really great. So now Garrus and Griglock for the DDO experience. When you guys make a build, where do you kind of start? Or, if you're just gonna, do you think, I want endgame play, or where, like, what's your overall process? Just like from a high level, don't need to get into the nitty gritty, but
Garrus, you want to kick it off?
Sure. I have a couple of different places where I start whenever I'm looking at a build. I consistently get bored with whatever playstyle I'm stuck in, so I'm always looking for doing something different, something new, something just to shake things up and get my attention in a different way. So for me, I actually draw inspiration from a lot of different things. I've pulled ideas for a character from something I see in a TV show or in a book that I'm reading, and just seeing some of the abilities that they exhibit makes me think of some of the ones that I've seen in DDO, and it's like, okay, so can I make a functional character that has some of these abilities? How would that look? What do I have to do to bring all of that together to make something that would play interesting? It's different enough for me to want to do it, and at the same time, knowing how a lot of the typical groups that I run with do a lot of endgame content, how do I get it up to that power level that it actually is a contributor and not just a pylon?
Give us an example.
Well, one of the ones that I did from a book series, I believe it's a Songs of Chaos series. The main character is a single weapon fighting. He's just got his sword in his main hand. He's got a few abilities where he can fire a blast out of one of his hands, and he can do a stomp that creates an area around him that buffs and heals himself and friends and does damage to his enemies. Well, this sounds very familiar. There's a single weapon fighting setup that you can do. Uh, the Sacred Fist gave us the Key Blast option that you can do with your key that you get. That's a level 1 spell that you get with that class. And the Stomp, it's a consecration. So we have a Divine Crusader, Sacred Fist, single weapon fighting. Sounds like a longsword, and that just started to put together a build for me. And this is actually a build that I gave to Nacho that she seemed to enjoy.
Oh yeah, I did like that Sacred Fist build. That was really fun to play.
That spawned from a character that I was reading about in a book.
Nice. So when you first think of these, do you first go to the game and work through it there, or do you work through it on the character planner first?
Typically, the first thing I jump to is the wiki when I actually start looking at what I'm going to have to do to execute everything. In the back of my mind, sorry, I got a guy's mowing here. I'm not sure if that's picking up. In the back of my mind, there's a lot of aspects of the game and the abilities that I am familiar with that I know. So as I start putting them together in my brain, I then look up on the wiki for quick reference what these things are based off of. And as I start to map those ties together, I switch to using the planner and put in all of these bigger pieces and start from the wider array of what the style is that I want it to be able to do. And I build down to the root of what the character needs to be, what the abilities need to lay out as, and I just flesh everything out in the planner after.
And same question to you, DDOExperience. How and where do you get your ideas for builds?
Yeah, so I mean, I tend to play off meta builds a lot because I like to understand the way different effects interact, the way different items might interact. So, unless we're as a guild looking to push uh, endgame raids to Reaper 10, I'll find myself playing a lot of I don't want to call them niche builds, but they're definitely not built to be min-max. Some of them are exploratory. And you can't always tell how something's going to function just off of the builder, but the builder can tell you if you're in the right ballpark. So, for instance, there were two new long swords that came out recently, the fried and frozen fish swords that give the extra artifact crit multiplier. So those seem like they would be really nice to fit into a gear set. So you start with the idea, you start to flesh through a 2-weapon fighting build, and now let's actually see how we can fit the gear Tetris together to see if we can make that work. I think you had asked earlier too, do I focus on the end game? I don't know if it's really focusing on the end game so much as what is the build's purpose? What do you ultimately want it to do? So if it's a healer, okay, how can I maximize its healing potential or its effectiveness in that role? If it's DPS, okay, so given that I want to use these two swords and be 2-weapon fighting, now let's really dig into how can I maximize the DPS with the build based off of that. So I guess I would start with more of the role or the goal for the build and build towards that.
Yeah, that's kind of like what I was thinking or alluding to. Like, what is the goal? Is it end game, or is it just a play style, or is it trying to take advantage of this particular um, thing or spell? Um, but now,
Yeah.
when you're looking at a build or a character, and it's we got like broad categories: casters, and melee, and then support, right? Like for I play casters a lot, so some of the things that I almost always take on my builds are, um, whatever school. So like an evocation focus, and then metas that I find useful for it. I don't really play melee a whole lot, so or I don't play them a whole lot anymore. So like, but the question here is, what are the feats or selections that you almost always take, or like I remember years and years and years ago, it was the debate was when to take power attack, right? Like not so much that, but like, do you take you always take power attack on a melee, or do you always take this? Do you always, certain things you just always try to fit in because they're good and they work, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think for a long time, part of the meta was melees take adrenaline because you want the really big crits, especially if you're two-handed fighting or if you're a rage build, you're going to be an adrenaline. Well, I wanted to explore, especially when Dragonlord came out. Now we have all these tactical feat options. You have a lot of great options within the tree itself to reduce the enemy's fort. What if you go all in on Dire Charge? Or what if I choose a different epic strike? So the sword sings out of Fate Singer, for instance. So the first build that I did with Dragonlord was actually a dwarf. It was single weapon fighting with a dwarven axe, which is a hand and a halfer, but it counts as a two-handed weapon for the purposes of two-handed fighting. And I had a shield in my offhand. So for that build, that was really exploratory. I knew it wasn't going to be meta, but I really wanted to test, hey, between Dire Charge and the Sword Sings and some of the other epic strikes available, can I find a viable alternative to using adrenaline? And the answer was yes. And I don't know if I would have arrived at the same conclusion if I had done the same experiment on a meta build that was two-handed fighting with a great axe, for instance, or in a fury build. I think adrenaline would have still come out on top. Whereas by exploring an off-meta build, I discovered a mechanic that I was then able to later create a meta build around. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
It does.
that makes sense because like before the update, which shall not be named, which nerfed a big thing for casters, so I don't want to get into that. Um, if I was on that type of caster, I took it. Like Dragon Breath, right? Like I took it because it worked really, really good. And now that it's not as good, I think, um, there's other things available, and I kind of almost like that they did that. Probably get some hate for that, but like, it's reminds me too much of way back in the day. Everybody running around with two weapon fighting in blue pajamas because of evasion, and you were 12 something six fighter into rogue. Like it just. Bleh. But that's just
Batman builds.
yeah,
Everybody was there.
yeah.
I remember the days.
Yeah. Real quickly, I just want to kind of know what you guys are playing right now. Uh, Garrus, what kind of character are you playing right now?
At the moment, I am doing a 16 Dragon Lord, 3 Bard, 1 Rogue, Shader Kai, single weapon fighting, hand axe, chain build. Um, it was something that kind of turned out to be a little bit more meta. A lot of different people were trying different versions of it. I just sat down one day. I'm like, okay, Dragon Lord's giving us 2 crit multiplier. What other way can I abuse this with another weapon? And swashbuckling with the hand axe turned out to be one of the most effective. So I'm running with that on a pretty wide crit range, decent crit multiplier. So even in raids when we're pushing, I get to have some pretty decent crits. It does a lot of damage. But again, like I said, I get bored easily, so I'm in the middle of 3 different build plans to come up with the next life.
And what about yourself, Maetreim? What kind of character are you playing right now?
Well, I sort of have 2 characters at the moment. I have one that's constantly past life running with Brackart because he's going through all his lives, and I use that character to level up with him and get additional past lives. But my main Maetreim is a defensive tank Intimi Monk DPS machine. Basically, it tries to be everything, but mostly defensive. So, I mean, if in version 2 of the builder, that's the only test example test file that I actually distribute with it. So if you click on that, you could actually see the build as is from version 2. I don't know if you got that there.
No, I don't have that up right now, but
but yeah, if you're interested, you could actually see it in version 2 because it's a supplied example test file
Okay.
that I pass around with that version of the software, and yeah, I find it quite a lot. It holds its own. I mean, I solo on Reaper 4, and yesterday I was the main tank in a group where we were running Reaper 7 or 8, and as I'm a defensive monk, I try and my main aim is just to not die because I hate dying. That's
See,
my
and I'm a soulstone all the time. Just ask anybody that's ever played with me.
I have
They
a
have like
pocket
a
specially
dedicated,
for you.
yep, dedicated pocket space. And what about yourself, Griglock? And if you say cleric, let me tell you.
Hey, listen, one, there's nothing wrong with cleric, but I'm not currently on a cleric. Currently, I'm actually on a build that we covered during Fixer Upper. It's the one that I covered with VMO. So it's going to be 1 rogue, 3 monk, and the rest
Uh-oh.
build. So you get to 100% offhand, 100% double strike, decent melee power. The chain attacks are just really good. I'm going to run that to cap, play it up for some Reaper points, and then I'm going to a quarterstaff build that's totally cleric, and it's going to be awesome.
Uh-huh. Well, at some point. So on your show Fixer Upper, if somebody just wants to go through something rather than submit a build, let's say that it's a class that they either haven't played in a really long time or haven't played at all, do they just submit a request through the forums?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a forum thread there. If you're just curious about a build or a play style, or if you don't have a full build but you had an idea of, hey, would it be possible to do X? Just request it. We'll put it in there. For instance, about 3 months ago, there was a lot of talk. People were saying, "Man, I wonder if you could ever do a summoner build in DDO." And so I made one, and then we did our 10 hound with it. It was great.
Nice. And Kaleva. Hi, beautiful lady.
Yes.
What kind of character are you currently playing?
So my main character, which is Germ Flask, is an alchemist. Right now, she's an acid alchemist. She lives on the TR train. Sometimes she goes to 32. Sometimes she just goes to 20. But I just enjoy leveling characters. The other character that I play is just a pure warlock. Both are acid, so nothing super fancy. But Germ Flask, she's the character that I will experiment with. Like, I've got an idea, and I tried it a little bit, and it didn't quite work out the way I wanted it to, so I'm back to the drawing board with it. Is to do a monk splash with alchemist, trying to focus on the glue bomb and then the multi-vial and then smacking them in the face with to finish them off was kind of the idea. And it was kind of fun, but it's one of those that builds that is powerful and then it falls off. But
I like to call those flavor builds,
yes, it is definitely a flavor build.
like my ice cream flavor of the week.
So one last question from me for Grig and Gariss. You guys, y'all have been building characters for a little bit now, and you're pretty knowledgeable in builds. What is one piece of advice you would give to somebody that wanted to learn more about builds and to get into the build mechanic space in DDO?
You want to start us off, Greg?
Yeah, so I think the one piece of advice I could give everybody is to put the ego aside and be open to talking to other people. I had Ying on the show, Fixer Upper, a couple weeks ago, and there's this saying he's coined, none of us is as smart as all of us, and I really like that. So whatever the build is, I haven't come up with a single build yet or seen anyone come up with a build that hasn't been improved when they take it back to the community for feedback. So be involved in the communities. A lot of the DDO communities are great, and just be open to feedback about your build.
I pretty much would have just kept in the same area. If you're wanting to get started doing builds, one of the things that will start helping you a lot is to look at existing builds and try to break them down backwards. But again, like Greg Lock was saying, don't be afraid to ask questions. Most of the community, I say most because not everybody's perfect, is going to be pretty open and wants to help, because there is no set solution. Every time something goes through a cycle, there's new things that are found, new information comes up, or the game updates and changes. Things are always in flux. I myself just learned like yesterday that there's a hidden effect on an ability that isn't explicitly stated but in fact works. So I didn't know that, so I was doing builds assuming that this wasn't a thing. Now I can change a whole bunch of builds that I had and make them far more effective. So don't be afraid to ask questions.
For sure.
In like 3 words, what is that?
What is what?
That you learned?
What ability?
Yeah. Yes.
1 second. I gotta pull it up on the thing. In Shirati, apparently the tier 5 Feywild attunement that states you're always in point blank shot range also means that you're always in ranged sneak attack range. Previously, the only thing that explicitly stated that was the capstone of Deepwood Stalker, and that's the only place where it's explicitly stated separately for you're always in point blank shot and range sneak attack range. But apparently, this is working with range sneak attack, even though it doesn't explicitly state.
That's interesting.
See, and I would have never known that at all.
No, me neither. One thing that you did say, Gariss, is something that like I was like, yes, that's exactly how I do stuff. Look at other builds and then tear them down or try to reverse engineer it, however you want to say it. Like I'm bad at coming up with my own ideas sometimes for builds. So what I've done is I know Strimtom has a ton of builds that he's on the forums, and Ging has some other stuff on the forums as well. There's a ton of builds out there. So I look at those and I'm like, all right, well, I want to do this. Axel, I've used some of his builds. I've used Voodoo's builds. They're all as like all right, this is what I want to kind of play, or this is the primary class past life that I'm after. And I go look at the other builds, and then I start to be like, well, this thing, or enhancement I don't really care for, or it doesn't fit my play style. So, I swap it out, and I toy with the build and I tinker with it. And so that's kind of like what I do. But one thing I did learn from the DDOExperiance's show, Fixer Upper, when you had Yang on, that was a fantastic show. Was oddly enough the single weapon fighting, because I'm doing my alchemist life, right? And I usually had a feed or two left over, and so now I've started taking single weapon fighting to boost my hit points, because it didn't click in my brain for whatever reason that was a good thing to take if there was an open feat. So like more HP, that's great, because if your HP is a positive number, you're alive and able to do DPS. So that's your free tip of the week.
Yeah, and to go with that, not every build that could exist has been explored. Like we were talking a little bit earlier, I have over 1,900 build files from Maetreim's planner in like in an encyclopedia database on my system. That's not every possible thing that's out there. There are more. There are different ways to do things.
Oh,
Just
yeah.
because you're not going to be considered the end game meta doesn't mean that it's not going to be fun and extremely enjoyable to play. Especially some builds are better when leveling and not that great in endgame. Some builds only come together at endgame. So it's all really what you want to do.
Exactly. One of the things I tell people too is that reset tree button when you're looking at your enhancements. Don't be afraid to click it. Right. If especially when you're leveling, some builds level one way, but they play differently at endgame. Like I don't, they just if
Hardcore was the biggest teacher for me with that, because any of the builds that I run in endgame, when I'm trying to run them on hardcore, I end up resetting my enhancements probably 20 times before I actually hit cap.
Yeah, for sure.
We do have a question from the Twitch chat that says, in your SDK 1631 chains build, did you go with the Inquisitor or Vistani for the last 11 action points?
I actually didn't do either of them. My spread was a little bit unique compared to what most everybody else was doing. Let me try to get it up real quick here.
We're actually running really close to our time. Do either of you guys mind contacted either through the forums or Discord for questions based on builds? I know, Greg Glock, you actually have a whole forum thread dedicated to this. What about Maetreim or Gariss?
I'm not as active within the forums. I'm totally fine with Discord messages, but yeah, I've had a few people hit me up for questions and whatnot, so that's totally fine. I got it to load real quick. 36 Dragon Lord, 6 Ravager, 11 in Swashbuckler, 13 in Falconry, 13 in Vistani, 1 in War Chanter is my final breakdown.
Sounds like an interesting split.
It's definitely unique.
Yeah. So with what you said, you have over 1,000 build files. I don't think it's the number of unique builds within DDO itself is just a very, very large number. Just because there's so many different ways that you can customize your build, or take different feats and enhancements and all that stuff. But we are just a little bit past 4 o'clock, so I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up the show. Maetreim, appreciate you making the builder V2. We will definitely have links in the video for to download it. So thank you so much, and thank you for coming on and talking about the builder.
You're welcome.
Gariss and Greg, thank you to both of you for coming on and sharing your knowledge on builds. And we appreciate you, both of you, being open to taking questions and talking build more with the community. And the last thing I'm going to say before I turn it over to Nacho to end the show is to make sure that you check out the DDO experience on DDO Stream, the DDO's official Twitch channel, on Monday nights, correct?
Yep, Mondays at 8 p.m. Eastern. And thank you so much for having me on.
All right. Nacho, it's all you.
Sorry, I was typing the shout out for DDO stream. I did in chat give you a shout out, Greg Lock, to your DDOExperiance Twitch, but then also the DDO stream as well. For those who don't have it, remember, follows are free and they make people happy. So let's spread that DDO love, right? Again, thank you guys so much for coming on to the show and, answering our questions because we're nosy little boogers. Don't forget, guys, VIP loyalty program has started. If you are a VIP or plan to be VIP, don't forget to go, and I believe this first month is character space or like bank space.
Bank space.
Bank space. Yep.
Yes, and then also,
as well, I think is what at the same time.
I'm sorry, could you say again?
You can change your dedicated spells as a VIP, like as a sorcerer and warlock, whatever. You can switch out your spells for an hour when you log in, I think.
Yes.
Nice. Also, Year of the Dragon. This month, I believe it is create your own expansion pack. Content only. You don't get the extras. You gotta upgrade yourself if you want to get those little bells and whistles. And then, of course, if you already have all the expansion packs, like me, you get an elixir of discovery.
A bit
Greater.
unfortunately.
Yes, greater elixir of discovery. Thank you. And then don't forget to check out the sales. I'm not going to read through those, but
Storage.
hey, look, they might. It sounds like they planned that.
They're trying to make us hoard pixels.
Hey, I got 99 problems in inventory space is all of them.
I believe that. So,
All right, well, thank you guys so much for being here. Don't forget, this is a bi-weekly show, so we're not going to be here next weekend, but we'll be back the weekend after next.
yep. Thanks to everybody that showed up to watch us live. Thanks to all the YouTube viewers and the supporters of the show. It's all appreciated so very much. And again, like Nacho said, we will be back in 2 Saturdays. I believe it's the 18th. If I'm not
Correct.
mistaken. Yep. All right. So join us next time on on May 18th. My months are weird. May 18th for our next show, where I think we'll just be playing a game called DDO and talking about a game called DDO. Until then, take care, and we'll see you next time. Bye.